Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com, your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now. Subscribe. Always available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
All righty, here we go. Caleb Calhoun as the Vols dodge an absolutely major bullet in overtime. Go ahead and get on board now. There was a point in the third quarter I thought we would be talking about Tennessee overcoming a slow start. Felt like Tennessee was pulling away at one point in that game with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Caleb has your rapid reactions right now on offthehooksports.com. My column is posted. And Caleb, I thought the game was trending towards Tennessee pulls away, but nothing could be further from the truth. In the end, Tennessee continually made mistakes and allowed Pitt to stay in the game with a backup quarterback. And just curious what you come away with from that game. I think there's cause for concern, but I also think Tennessee did survive, and ultimately you're going to have games like that in the season.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of, I'm sure you and I both have followed college football and covered Tennessee football enough to know that this could mean one of two things, because I still don't know. A lot of us don't know how good Pittsburgh is, because that West Virginia game, I don't think West Virginia is that good this year, honestly. So that would be the reason for concern. And you're right, they made some just mistakes they don't usually make. Trayvon Flowers is a fifth-year senior. He shouldn't be trying to catch a punt over his head like he did. And yes, Paxton Brooks getting his punt blocked. I think the Jalen Wright fumble wasn't necessarily as much a mistake as it just seemed like a decent defensive play. But you're right; those were crucial mistakes and crucial moments in the second half, and Tennessee found a way to pull it out. And when crunch time came, they came through. I mean, Hendon Hooker had a touchdown run, called back for a holding in overtime, and then immediately turns around and throws a touchdown pass to Cedric Tillman. You can't overlook big moments like that. Hooker and Tillman together, we talked about them all off season. I said this would have to be the game if Hooker was to have any case to make of being a Heisman caliber quarterback. And if Tillman was truly to make a case to be the best receiver in college football, this was that game. And they didn't look like they were doing that early. They looked like they were setting their postseason recognition chances on fire with that first quarter.
Yeah, I guess we could point to a million different things as the most surprising thing. You mentioned the Flowers punt return. Yes, fifth-year senior. The fact that Tennessee got a punt blocked. But I still think we could go on and on about the mistakes, but the most surprising to me was that Tennessee didn't come out and convert earlier as far as some sort of points. Being down 10-0, to Pitt. I know Pitt's at least a decent team, top half of the NCAA, but I don't know that they're a top 25 team, as you alluded to with the West Virginia game. The start to me still was the biggest thing that stood out. You've got to go out there, and that's what Tennessee's predicated on. Caleb is getting a lead and taking off and putting pressure on you, and there was just none of that pressure applied to Pitt on the scoreboard throughout the game.
Yeah, but I kind of actually took a positive from that more than a negative, because yes, they started awful in this game. But last year, we forget, although they would start strong, they played awful in the second quarter. Tennessee was probably the worst team in college football in the second quarter last year. So for them to start so bad, if this had happened last year, I mean, we would have written them off in a heartbeat. We would have said there's no chance for them to make this a game. And so for them to start so sloppy, have so many mistakes in the first quarter, and then kind of rebound in the second, that actually was, to me, a really positive sign. They did a lot of good things. Let's not forget, there were some clutch plays. They were in danger of going down 17-0. Pitt was driving already up 10, and then Trey Flowers gets that interception. And despite his mistakes on the day, Flowers did have the interception to spark the run for Tennessee, and then he had the key sack in overtime to pretty much secure the game. So yeah, I would say that I give them credit for that, but yeah, those third quarter mistakes that was really bad football. That third quarter.
Yeah, I mean that really surprised me that they would play that poorly in the third quarter after they had overcome the bad start. That's what stood out to me the most. And Tennessee at that point you would think would have battened down the hatches and been better off moving forward, but they really weren't, and they were a team, Caleb, that um, it was odd to me because I didn't think they ever looked like they were nervous or panicked, so to speak. I just thought they made mistakes repeatedly.
Exactly. I
It
agree.
is do you see? Does that make sense at all? I mean, they're kind of two different things. Is that
Yeah, so the first quarter I thought a little bit of nerves were there because two drops by Cedric Tillman and a couple overthrows by Hooker. But you're right, the third quarter, those were just basic mistakes that you don't usually see from, that a team that has so many seniors like Tennessee this year. I would say, I think that I'll say the positive from that though is in the third quarter when they were making so many mistakes. This was supposed to be a team that had issues on defense, and until that last drive in regulation, the defense really held firm in the second half for most of the time. Before that last drive, and when you include overtime, Pitt got into the red zone, I think 4 or 5 times and had 10 points total on those red zone trips, or maybe 13 points actually. But the Vols forced him his field goal. There was that time where they got to the Tennessee 21 and got the interception. They got to the Tennessee 28 at one point, and Tennessee stopped them on a 4th and 3. So I think you got to give the defense. Yes, they blew it on that 4th and 1. I don't really, that 4th-and-goal touchdown pass at the end of regulation, though. I wouldn't even say that was the defense giving up a play. I would say that was just a really great throw and catch to Jared Wayne. I mean, Warren Burrell was all over him, and we've all been critical of Warren Burrell, but I don't know if that was so much on him as much as that was just a great throw and catch right there, and it was just one of those plays.
I agree with that, Caleb. I also think that when I look at Tennessee and their performance, this is what that defense is going to be, Caleb. I mean, the bottom line is this defense is going to turn in some big plays, but at the same time, it's also going to give up some yards because they're fatigued at times. Now, not so many, not so much the yards today, so to speak, but I do think that the big play ability that people were questioning earlier was on display. I mean, for goodness sake, I can't remember the last time Tennessee has knocked out two quarterbacks, and they almost did that during the Pitt game. And there was a stat that I didn't have a chance to double check, but according to the announcers on the game, 25 quarterback pressures would be the most in 10 years. I'm that's why it's not in my copy on offthehooksports.com, but I share it with you because the announcer said it. But that 4 sacks for sure, we do know that. They were in the backfield. That was a tough defensive front to play against today.
I agree, and that really neutralized Pittsburgh's biggest advantage because, as we know with Pat Narduzzi, Pittsburgh is all about the pass rush. They live and die by that. They've been doing that since he took over in 2015. I mean, this is the program that produced Aaron Donald, and they live and die by the rush up front. And they did it again today. They got to Hendon Hooker a pretty good bit, but I would say if you were comparing pass rushes, I'd say Tennessee won on the day in that regard. And they brought the heat all night or all afternoon. And you're right, that was a huge deal in this game. Not just the pressure that they brought. I mean, how many balls were batted down at the line of scrimmage?
But as far as past breakups, I can look that up, but an absolute ton. And you,
Yeah,
the and they didn't have to bring. Now they did bring pressure a couple of times that I noticed, or bring extra defenders for pressure. But yeah, I go back to that Ball State game, and I pointed this out, and I, I'm kind of an X's and O's guy to the point where it probably glazes some people over. But they did a lot of stunts and twists in that game, and I think it was to determine what works. And they seemed dialed in as to what worked against Pitt, and they did create a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and were able to survive that. But this is not going to be a defense. And really, in college football nowadays, Caleb, go ahead and comment, guys. I know you're listening, so go ahead and comment, and we'll get to your comments here momentarily. Your thoughts on the game. So, Caleb, I know that this Tennessee defense and where we are with college football is not going to come out and have the old goal of keeping you to under 17 points. That's just not college football anymore. Okay. That's what John Chavis used to say. So that's not the case anymore. But you just have to kind of accept the fact that this defense, where it is as far as experienced talent, needs to turn in 6 to 8 significant plays or 3 or 4 big game changing plays to be considered as a success. Caleb, I don't know at the end of the day that we're going to look at the total yards now or in November and determine if Tennessee had a good day defensively. It seems crazy to say that, but I don't know that total yards is how you judge this defense.
I agree. Particularly with also when it comes to total yards, when you have a Josh Heupel who runs tempo, you get so many possessions. I mean, yards per drive, points per drive, yards per play, points per play. Like, these are stats that matter a lot more now than just like total yards. I would say it takes me back to I know I talked on our show Friday about one year with Peyton Manning where the Colts didn't care about time of possession at all, and they won a game within 14 minutes. There was another year where they did care about time of possession, and it was mostly because the Colts defense was so bad. And they ended up having a top 10 technical defense that year in total yards, but everybody knew that was just because Peyton Manning managed the clock to make sure the defense was off the field a lot more. So yeah, I think total yards is very, very, very. I mean, I never thought it was that great of a stat to go by anyway. Last year, yeah, Tennessee was like number one, like outside of the top 120 in passing yards allowed. And yeah, their pass defense was a problem. But if you looked at yards allowed per pass play, they were around like 70 or 71, which is still below average, but not awful. And then you're right, you got to take into account how often the defense is on the field with a system that doesn't value time of possession. Things like that. I will say, you're right, I didn't see much pressure brought either. I saw it twice. One time it was perfectly dialed, and that was when Wesley Walker got that 4th down sack.
Yep.
The other time was the touchdown pass to the tight end. And people were questioning why Tim Banks brought coverage there. But ideally, Jeremy Banks, your linebacker, wouldn't get lost in coverage so badly the way he did on that play. And it's something I think we talked about on Friday too. The linebackers in coverage, that's the biggest problem with this defense. They're awful in coverage, and they were last year.
How does that get better?
I don't know. I mean, you're dealing with, Jeremy Banks is a converted running back, so he likes to hit and tackle, which is fine, but he's awful in coverage. And Aaron Beasley, I don't know how that's an issue with him. He was a converted safety. I think the only way it gets better is if Jawan Mitchell gets healthy or gets back on the field, and I don't know what's going on with him.
Yeah, they've been very quiet about that. I've been told it's off the field issues, which, we knew what that stuff was 10 years ago. We don't now. So let me ask you this question. I'll throw the poll question out there. After the Pitt game, are you concerned about the Vols? I'm going to say no, not at all. And then on the flip side, I'm going to say yes, very much so. So what do you think? Caleb, where do you stand on that?
If those are my two options, I would go with no, not at all. I'm closer to not concerned than I am very much so concerned. There are some concerns, but I mean, we watched Tennessee last year. I don't think they're going to give up a block punt every game. Trey Flowers isn't going to muff a punt every game. Cedric Tillman isn't going to drop 2 passes in the first quarter every game. The only real concern that I would see as a consistent one is Hooker did miss a couple of, it was very Joe Milton-like, missed a couple of easy touchdown passes down the field. And, I think there was a little bit of that last year, and it just was better than it was with Joe Milton. So, but, you've got to convert on those. There was one where Tillman easily had it. He was wide open down the sideline for a touchdown, and Hooker overthrew him. So, yeah, that's an issue.
I saw that one as well. I think this was a big game for Pitt, and I do want to throw this at you. We saw Alabama struggle to beat Texas earlier in the day, and they managed to do that late in the game. Alabama has a target on their back each and every game because of what they've done under Nick Saban. Caleb, I think Tennessee to some extent has a target on their back because if you don't show up with your best game, Josh Heupel's going to continue to run tempo. You could be embarrassed on national television. And so as far as anybody overlooking the Vols, I don't think that's going to be the case this year. And also they've gotten a ton of offseason press, which you could say about any team in any market, but really Tennessee from a nationwide standpoint, even going to the Nico potential NIL payment, everything, they've been talked about a lot this offseason in the college football world. So you're not going to fly under the radar anytime soon if you're the Vols.
Oh, exactly. And that was definitely the case today because you don't think Pitt took it personal that they were ranked higher than Tennessee. They were better than Tennessee last year. They beat Tennessee at Tennessee last year, and they were a touchdown underdog. They had every reason to be upset about that. Very much reminded me of I think this was you were covering during this time 2001 Tennessee Florida. Remember how upset they were about being 18-point underdogs in that game?
I do 18 and a half.
18 and a half, that's right. And the line moved. It started at 17 and they moved it up to 18 and a half. And it was two top 5 teams that each had a loss at the time.
Yeah, that was a very memorable week. That was the week that, of course, it was moved back because of 9/11. I learned I was going to be a dad while I was in Gainesville, so that was a big week for me. So yes, I remember that week very well. Glenn says the offensive line better get better before Florida. That's a lot of betters. I agree. I feel like every time I watch Tennessee that I'm concerned about Hendon Hooker, and I thought they called a lot of running plays, design running plays. I'm not talking about the option plays. That's part of the offense. It's his decision. It's his read whether or not to pull or give it up. But the designed runs, I'm pretty much good with those, and I think they can stay in the first half of September. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a bit of a shocker that, remember I said on Friday to win, Tennessee would have to win the rushing battle by 150 yards, and they lost the rushing battle by 50 yards or more. I got that one completely wrong. What I'll say is if you're looking at the sack totals, and because Tennessee was hurried a lot too, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Pitt does that to everybody. Like I said, Pat Narduzzi just lives and dies with the pass rush. And one of the sacks was more on Princeton Fant than anything. I don't know. He just completely whiffed on a block over the middle. And I mean, everybody's been asking why Tennessee doesn't incorporate the tight ends more into the passing game. We kind of saw why with that one because he missed on that rush, and then the very next play he committed a penalty that made it like 3rd and 30 for the Vols. And so I wouldn't worry too much about the O-line play just yet.
Yeah, and I know they rotate pretty much series to series between Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren, but Jacob Warren had a nice catch, and I'm not just saying this because he does work with this Off the Hook Sports, and we'll have his podcast up tomorrow along with Cooper Mays on offthehooksports.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let me go ahead and say that, and if you can click that like button, I'd greatly appreciate it. We're gonna hang with you. So share this too, tell a friend, and we'll get you involved. And I wonder if you start to change that ratio a little bit from Fant to Warren to more like 75-25 Warren as opposed to 50-50.
I think they like
knee-jerk.
Well, I think they have different roles, and you're right. Warren is a lot better at his role right now than Fant's been, and I think I think the thing with Princeton Fant is he's more the athletic tight end, so they like the guy being able to make the potential for Fant to be able to make plays in open space when he catches the ball, whereas Warren has always been more the red zone tight end. I don't know if they'll start to use Warren a little bit more, between the hashes, because in terms of in the receiving portion of it, Princeton Fant can be really effective. But you're right. The tight end, people are so obsessed with receiving numbers for tight ends. Everybody forgets the blocking part of it. And I mean, tight ends are only a threat if they can actually block, unless Tom Brady's throwing you the ball on your Rob Gronkowski and you could basically play receiver.
True. Jose saying, Jose, I want you to hit that subscribe and like button. I would greatly appreciate that. And feel free, if you're watching on Twitter, we'd greatly appreciate for you to retweet us out. Jose saying the defense gave coach just what he needs. Not always going to blow out teams. You have to be good enough to give the team a few plays on defense. I think that's where Tennessee is. I mean, I think they could give up. We could be having a conversation in the next month at some point, Caleb, that Tennessee had a good defensive day and gave up 350 yards. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But if they make the big plays, everything's good.
Oh, I agree. This is a defense that's going to go with big plays and live and die by them. And I think that's fine, honestly. If you can come away with, if you can get 4 sacks in a game, if you can get a strip sack, which Tyler Barron got, if you can get an interception, and should have had 3 interceptions, all those are exactly what you want out of the defense. And, we talk about Tennessee's mistakes. The one concern I would say for Tennessee is it's not like Pitt played mistake-free either. I mean, they missed 2 field goals, including a chip shot field goal. That, again, this wouldn't have gone to overtime had they hit one of those. So
it's true.
Tennessee wasn't the only one to make special teams mistakes in this one today.
No, agreed. Glenn saying, be sure and hit that subscribe and like button, guys. We appreciate it. Glenn saying the offense seemed a little out of sync, but we got with Kamal Hayden going to be a stud. Got the W. Excuse me. Sometimes these are hard to read, Caleb. Your thoughts on Hayden?
I thought he played fine. I thought for the most part, I wasn't, people are going to question the cornerbacks, and yes, the pass defense is an issue, but I honestly, I keep saying this. I think the pass defense is an issue because the linebackers are no help in coverage. And that's a huge part of defending the pass. In the intermediate passing game, a lot of people are going to torch the Vols with that. Ball State moved the ball well in the intermediate passing game. A lot of people didn't pay attention to that because of how much of a blowout it was. But again, I don't really know how you fix that. I still don't think Tennessee has. I don't think Kamal Hayden is Tennessee's number 1 corner. I think that was still Warren Burrell, and he has issues as the number 1 corner. But yes, in his role, I think Hayden is very good.
And somebody's saying check Texas A&M if you're concerned about the Vols. I want to kind of be zoned in on this game, but wow, quick thoughts on the day, including A&M, Alabama surviving a scare. Any thoughts that you have over the course?
And Marshall beating Notre Dame too.
Marshall beating Notre Dame. Yeah. So,
the one thing I learned from the day is never schedule. People should have known this years ago. Never schedule Appalachian State as one of your opening games. Michigan knows that. Tennessee learned it. Tennessee should have lost to Appalachian State in 2016 in overtime to open the season. So, and that was when they were top 10. That was the year they were expected to win the East, and then flamed out in the second half of the season. So,
Appy State's a good program that develops players over time, and those guys usually tend to be tough. They're not going to have the most talented roster, but I got a lot of respect for that program.
Oh, I do too. And North Carolina is a growing area. There could be some fertile recruiting ground. I mean, if you talk about like Group of 5 North Carolina schools, now that Appalachian State's Division 1 or FBS, I wonder if they'll start to surpass East Carolina for the best Group of 5 FBS program.
Interesting. All right, so let's continue with the Tennessee game as Hendon Hooker was 27 of 42 for 325 yards and 2 touchdowns. What did you think of the way Hooker played? We bragged about him so much and the way he played with poise, but that was Ball State. We all know that. What did you think about the way he played against Pitt tonight?
Like I said earlier, missed some throws, which is concerning, but Hooker has not yet had a game. He showed it in the Music City Bowl. I'm going to be fair to him on that. It was just a loss, but he hasn't had a game that he won because he was clutch. And I got to give him credit. That was him tonight. That touchdown pass to Cedric Tillman, you can't overlook that in overtime for both of them to be able to bounce back after he just had a touchdown run called back because of a holding penalty. That was huge. He reverted back to taking a lot of sacks, but I don't think that was him holding the ball too long. I think that was just Pitt getting a great pass rush. And honestly, he should have been sacked about 3 more times, but he made the play single-handedly to avoid getting sacked. And so I think that Yeah, he made some mistakes, but I mean, I think he was very mentally tough in this game, and that's something that it's not that he hasn't shown. It's just he hasn't had the opportunity to really put that on display yet. Last year with even though the Vols did win a couple of close games and they were in a couple of close contests, the flow was a little bit different. This time, look, when things got tough, he delivered, and I know it's cliche, but you just can't overlook that. Throwing that touchdown pass in overtime, I'm not gonna overlook that. That was huge for him to stay calm in that moment.
Agreed. Well, so far, people are leaning towards the no, not at all, but not by very much. So far as our poll that we put out there, no, not at all. As far as are you concerned about the Vols? And yes, very much so, are the two options. No, not at all, 58%. Yes, very much so, 41%. Caleb, and so that's pretty close. And I think some people that really like to break down football, and you and I do realize there are issues with this team, but you and I realize there were issues before and didn't expect them to run the table, go 13-0 and play for a national title this year. If I had to pick between the two, so let me give my answer. After the Pitt game, are you concerned about the Vols? I would say yes, very much so. Just in that some of the mistakes that occurred and the fact that they came out flat against a ranked team, you know, Caleb, I would almost be more okay from an analysis perspective if they came out against Ball State and just won 28-13 or something, and we're very average. This to me should have been a game that got your attention. And I know that Pitt did some different things. They threw a lot early instead of setting up the pass with the running game. They still ran play action, but they threw a lot early. I think that caught Tennessee by surprise. I did not expect Tennessee to come out and be down 10-0 in the first half.
First quarter, yeah, I agree. I didn't expect right. I didn't expect that either. And like I said, if you were going to base it off the first quarter, I agree. Because the first quarter, those weren't like, again, a blocked punt and a muffed punt doesn't really concern me long term. I don't think that's going to be a consistent issue throughout the year. But yeah, the first quarter, I mean, there were some clear missed throws, but not so much the defensive play because, like you said, Pitt kind of threw some things at them that they weren't prepared for. There was that touchdown run. I mean, if anybody saw, Jeremy Banks was clearly held on that touchdown run, that 76-yard run, and that's what sprung it loose. So I think it was more the offense in the first quarter had way too many just missed opportunities, honestly. And I mean, and people would call it first game. People, Josh Heupel said at halftime, he implied that they just had like jitters early on, but like that alone is an issue. It's like, if you're a team that has jitters playing in a big game early on, that could be, what's going to happen when your first SEC game is Florida in 2 weeks?
Yeah. And you basically got a scrimmage to get ready for the Gators. And it just means more saying that it's college football. Anything can happen. Richardson at Florida was talking football last, and this week looks like garbage. So I'm not tuning into that game right now as we do this, but as of being live right now, talking Tennessee, Pitt, I think Tennessee is very fortunate to have escaped. Would you call this a moxie win at all with all the mistakes, Caleb?
All right, I'm going to sound super like lame, but I've heard the phrase moxie before, and I'm just not always sure what it means.
just having kind of a maturity to overcome would be the best way that I could put
Okay.
that. The confidence to overcome that sort of thing is
okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I've heard moxie used for like quarterbacks and things like that when they show a little swag. So I guess if I could see what you're saying now. In that way, yeah, there was some swag with this in the sense of they knew that they were going to win. That they not knew that they were going to win, but they made certain key plays. They never really panicked or came undone late in the third or fourth quarter when things were going against them. Like I said, the defense kept getting put in tough situations, and until that last drive kept coming through in a pretty good way. And then there was the Hooker pass to Tillman in the fourth quarter. I think the only thing I would say, like in terms of maturity, the only reason it's hard for me to go there is that again, they made mistakes that senior laden teams don't make. Again, Trayvon Flowers muffing. I can't get past that. He reached back to catch the punt. You're taught like in middle school, don't do that.
Well, no, he was way too deep. I mean, you want to run through the football, and I don't know if he thought he had a big return set up or what, but he timed it out just as poorly as you could have.
And this is a guy in Trayvon, by the way, who played center field in high school, and so he should know exactly how to time a ball that he's going to catch.
BJ from McMinnville. Hello, BJ. Please hit that like and subscribe button because we've got great content coming up, including Cooper Mays and Jacob Warren will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Balls time. Please hit that subscribe button and the like button. Feel free to share if you like, saying that I really love how they played. All right. So sometimes, Caleb, I think people that do what we do can be a little too close to it. And when you do take a step back, if you didn't know anything about all the mistakes and you said Tennessee beat a ranked team on the road and did it clutch in overtime, if that was the narrative that I laid out, we'd both say, oh, that's pretty good.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I mean, they brought up a stat. This is Tennessee's first game in the Northeast since they beat Syracuse in 1998 to win the national title. They're not going to win the national title. Please, don't anybody accuse me of saying they're going to.
But you got lit up by somebody on Twitter. Well, how did you get lit up by somebody on Twitter? I saw that. Did you see that?
I got lit up by somebody on Twitter.
Somebody got onto you on Twitter. I'll have to find it. I'm never going to be able to find it, but they tagged me. And yeah, so I'll send that to you. It doesn't matter. There are a lot of people on Twitter that don't know what they're doing. But Daniel saying with all the drama today, a win is a win, played our worst possible game and still came out on top. That's pretty accurate. I would agree with that. And
yeah, what I would add. Oh, sorry. You want to finish Daniel's other thought?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I would add that, bringing in the Syracuse game, Tennessee came out on top. And again, that Syracuse game, as you know, was about as sloppy of a second half as Tennessee ever played that whole year in football. In that 1998 Syracuse game, they played hideous in the second half of that game, and they needed a pass interference on the final drive to kick the game-winning field goal. So, and yes, that was a Syracuse team that had Donovan McNabb, so a little bit more elite than your average one. But I'm in an early game against a Northeast, playing in the Northeast against a ranked team. You play ugly and you win a close one. Sometimes I am just like, take the win. I don't think Alabama owes any apologies for winning a close one against Texas on the road. They're beating a Power 5 team on the road. This is college football.
Yeah, and you got to know Steve Sarkisian probably knew a little something about Alabama from his time there, and I'm sure he's dialed in for that game and his entire coaching staff. That's the game because they're not going to play for a national title this year, talking about Texas, but they have an opportunity to go out there and make a huge monster statement by beating Alabama. So that's one of those, you throw everything on the table, everything you got.
Exactly.
And I think that's what they did, and they stayed in the game. Daniel said it's been a hot minute since the defense won us a game. So, guys, if you like this content, I need you to do a couple of things. Please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. But most importantly, okay, turn your notifications on because I'm not going to lie to you. We're really proud of what we're doing at Off the Hook Sports and our YouTube channel. Just last week, we had Heath Schuler. We have Chris Landry, the coach with LandryFootball.com, breaking down Tennessee. So we'll have that. He'll give us a real grade, a breakdown. And I can tell you right now, he wasn't very impressed with Tennessee's defensive backfield. A lot of blown assignments. And also every Sunday, we have Jacob Warren, Tennessee's tight end, and Cooper Mays at Tennessee's center that join us, and they'll give us insight into the game. So, Caleb, anything that you want to close with before I go right? This is kind of similar to the Syracuse game, 1998, that you gave me that idea. That was a good thought. That's why I like having Caleb on board. Sometimes Caleb writes my columns just by giving me an idea. It's like done in my head.
Yes, in case anybody noticed, not only is it similar to the Syracuse game, but this game was the mirror image of last year's Tennessee Pitt game to a T. Last year, Tennessee jumped out on Pitt 10-0. Tennessee blocked a punt by Pitt. Tennessee lost its starting quarterback to injury and had its backup come in, and Tennessee lost the game. Literally everything. Like it was the craziest thing. I think I was thinking about it the whole time, assuming Tennessee was going to win. I was like, if they win, this is literally the reverse of what happened last year.
Yeah. Daniel saying it's been a hot minute since the defense won us a game. When is the last time that Tennessee's defense won them a game?
I mean, I would probably say most notably that 2019 season when Tennessee beat Kentucky on the road as an underdog. They had a huge goal line stand to beat Kentucky in that game. That was a moment when Tennessee fans were starting to believe in Jeremy Pruitt because they had started off awful that year, losing to Georgia State and BYU, fell to 1-4 and then 2-5, but they actually got on a roll at the end of the year and won 6 straight and then got a top 10 recruiting class. And then 2020 happened, and now we know why they got a top 10 recruiting class. So
it's those quarter pounders in the McDonald's bags. I don't think that ever really happened, that they were in McDonald's bags. I think they bought McDonald's and gave them cash. Do you really think they stuffed it in the bag?
I can't believe they would be that stupid.
Why? Even though, why would you? I mean, you don't have an envelope laying around or something. Maybe it had the power T on the envelope. All right. So Glenn says, thanks, Dave. Great show. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you being a part of it. And if you guys could hit that like, subscribe button, and we'd really encourage you to share it with a friend. Again, so pleased with Caleb. Amanda can't be with us tonight. She had a pre-existing engagement, but she is fantastic and with us each and every day. And we've got even more things coming up, big plans, and we're excited. So a lot happening, but in particular, turn those notifications on because you're going to want to hear from Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays as I visit with them for about 20 minutes or so. So we'll get into what happened in that game. That'll be good stuff. Last thing for Vols time, I'm going to give you kudos because I love your avatar. I can't tell if it's an American flag or it's a snowman. But anyway, it's red, white, and blue, which I like. Vols time says I can actually say the defense broke some ankles tonight. They almost broke 2 quarterbacks' ankles tonight. Cody said a win is a win. We have to have another corner better than Burrell. I don't know that conversation ends, Caleb, anytime soon.
No, it doesn't. And again, I think it's a little, Burrell's good when he's covering the number 2 receiver. It's covering the number 1. And if he's having trouble, my guess is anybody else in that role is going to have trouble too. I don't think the Vols have a number 1 quarterback on this team. And I think that's the problem.
I agree. Caleb, you're a young man. Enjoy your Saturday night. I'm going to go write some more about the Vols. It'll be on offthehooksports.com throughout the evening. And again, we'll have some great insight to the game with Coop and Jacob tomorrow. This has been a presentation